7:30 p.m. Pine Grove Steakhouse. Candlelight flickered across Veronica Sterling's porcelain features as she studied her phone like scripture. Her Chanel suit whispered wealth. Her diamond earrings caught the light with every dismissive headshake. Across the white tablecloth, Carter Blake's work-worn hands traced nervous patterns on his water glass. Motor oil lingered beneath his nails despite brutal scrubbing. "This was a mistake," Veronica's voice sliced through the romantic ambience like ice. "I don't date mechanics." Her eyes never lifted, never acknowledged his existence. The words landed like physical blows. Carter's shoulders tensed, jaw clenching as humiliation burned his throat. Then the universe exploded. Crystal shattered. Screams erupted. 3 shadows in tactical black burst through splintering glass, silenced weapons sweeping the room. "Amanda Walsh!" The leader's voice boomed above chaos. "Game over." But something had shifted in Carter's eyes. Something deadly. Something that had been sleeping for 5 long years. Tables overturned in violent arcs while wine glasses crashed against marble floors in explosive destruction that sent crystal fragments across Italian tile like deadly confetti. Burgundy liquid splashed across designer shoes and pressed tablecloths like abstract paintings born from terror and violence that consumed everything in its path. Elderly couples dove behind upholstered chairs while young families shielded children with trembling arms that shook like autumn leaves in hurricane winds. The maitre d' pressed himself against mahogany walls, his pressed uniform now wrinkled with pure fear and growing panic that spread through the restaurant like wildfire. Steam rose from abandoned dinner plates as chaos consumed the elegant ambiance that had taken years to cultivate through careful attention to detail and sophisticated atmosphere. The scent of mounting terror mixed with expensive perfume and spilled alcohol in ways that would haunt survivors for years to come, creating memories that therapy could never fully erase. Blood began to pool where broken glass had found flesh, adding metallic copper to the cocktail of fear that filled the air like poisonous fog that choked hope from desperate lungs seeking clean breath and safety. Carter's military training surfaced before conscious thought could interfere with automatic responses learned in darker places than small towns could ever imagine or understand through peaceful civilian experience. His body moved with fluid precision that belonged in war zones rather than romantic restaurants filled with innocent civilians enjoying what should have been peaceful evenings without violence or terror. Muscle memory overrode 5 years of deliberate forgetting and careful civilian construction that had fooled everyone, including himself, about his true capabilities and deadly potential. The nervous mechanic who fumbled with water glasses and stuttered through conversation vanished like smoke in hurricane wind that swept away all pretense and social masks. Something else entirely emerged from the wreckage of his carefully maintained normalcy and peaceful existence in small-town America where violence was supposed to be foreign and distant. His eyes swept the room with predatory efficiency, cataloging threats, exits, and tactical advantages with surgical precision that spoke of professional military training in classified facilities where death was taught as patriotic duty to country and constitution. Every movement became calculated, every breath measured, every heartbeat focused on survival and protection of innocent life against overwhelming odds and superior firepower. Veronica's phone clattered across Italian tile, screen spiderwebbing against unforgiving stone, with sounds like breaking bones in midnight graveyards, where secrets were buried beneath earth and stone. Her breathing came in sharp staccato gasps that misted in air, suddenly cold with approaching death and unimaginable violence that threatened to consume everything she'd built. The name Amanda Walsh echoed through her skull like cathedral bells tolling funeral masses for the living and the damned, who had nowhere left to run from pursuing government forces. 14 years of careful construction and meticulous identity building crumbled in 3 syllables that carried the full weight of murdered parents and systematic government betrayal of constitutional principles. Her designer mask slipped like melting wax under intense heat, revealing raw terror beneath polished confidence that had fooled corporate boardrooms and federal investigators for over a decade. The CEO who commanded multinational companies and controlled billions in assets sat frozen like a deer in headlights, watching long-buried nightmares materialize through restaurant smoke and emergency lighting that cast everything in hellish red shadows. Corporate power meant nothing against government assassination squads with unlimited resources and federal protection from prosecution under laws they'd sworn to uphold, but systematically violated for political gain and personal advancement. "Kitchen, now! Move fast and stay low!" Carter's voice carried steel she'd never heard before, tempered in furnaces that civilian life couldn't provide or comprehend through peaceful existence without constant threat of death. His calloused hand found her wrist with grip firm, but surprisingly gentle for someone clearly accustomed to violence and death in all its horrific forms and manifestations. "Stay low. Move when I move. Don't think, just follow my lead exactly without question or hesitation." The words came clipped, professional, devoid of the nervous stammering and social awkwardness from minutes earlier when she'd dismissed him with corporate cruelty that cut deeper than any physical blade. Veronica's eyes widened as she studied his transformed features with dawning comprehension of his true nature and hidden capabilities that civilian life had carefully concealed. The awkward mechanic who couldn't afford decent clothes and stumbled over simple conversation had disappeared entirely like morning mist before blazing sun that revealed hidden landscapes of incredible danger and lethal capability. In his place stood someone who calculated trajectories and exit strategies with mathematical precision that spoke of years spent in classified training facilities where ordinary men were forged into government weapons capable of incredible violence when circumstances demanded immediate and decisive action against enemies foreign and domestic. The lead gunman swept his weapon across screaming diners with methodical patience that spoke of extensive professional training and multiple similar operations conducted across various theaters of conflict around the world. His tactical gear bore no insignia, no identifying marks that could trace back to government handlers or private contractors who employed his specialized services for sensitive operations. His team moved in coordinated patterns, learned in classified facilities, covering angles and blocking exits with deadly efficiency that impressed even Carter's trained eye and professional assessment of their capabilities. They'd rehearsed this specific operation until every movement became second nature, flowing like deadly water through familiar channels of violence and precision, killing that left no witnesses. These weren't random killers or desperate criminals seeking quick money from restaurant patrons out for romantic dinners and peaceful evenings with loved ones. They were specialists in human elimination and government-sanctioned assassination programs that operated beyond congressional oversight and constitutional limitations. Hunters with unlimited federal resources and complete political protection from prosecution or investigation by honest law enforcement agencies that still believed in justice and constitutional principles. Their presence here meant someone very powerful wanted Amanda Walsh permanently silenced before she could expose more government corruption and political treason at the highest levels of federal authority. Carter's free hand found the ceramic salt shaker, weighing it like ammunition in his palm, while calculating distance and trajectory with mathematical precision that came from years of intensive training in improvised weapons and urban combat. His thumb traced its smooth surface, while his mind processed tactical variables that most civilians never considered in their safe, sheltered lives protected by others' sacrifice and vigilance. 15 feet through chaos and terror to reach the light switch mounted on the far wall near the emergency exit sign that promised escape from immediate danger. Doable with proper timing and sufficient distraction to mask movement from professional observers trained to notice everything that moved within their kill zone. The emergency exit behind the kitchen stood 30 feet beyond that initial target point, according to his mental mapping of the restaurant layout that he'd unconsciously memorized upon entering. Manageable distance if they moved fast, stayed low, and kept mounting fear from overwhelming years of professional training that civilian life had never quite managed to erase from muscle memory and combat instincts. Training that had cost him everything he'd once held dear, but might now save the life of someone who'd initially dismissed him as worthless and beneath her social consideration. The irony wasn't lost on him, even in the midst of life-or-death combat against overwhelming odds and superior numbers. Glass crunched beneath military-grade combat boots as the tactical team advanced through the dining room like apex predators seeking wounded prey in familiar hunting grounds that offered multiple tactical advantages. Families huddled behind overturned tables while children whimpered into their mothers' shoulders like frightened animals sensing approaching death and destruction that adults couldn't protect them from despite desperate attempts. The metallic scent of spilled wine mixed with gunpowder and pure terror that hung in the air like poisonous fog that choked hope from desperate lungs. One gunman methodically checked behind the ornate bar, while another moved toward the restrooms with professional thoroughness that left absolutely nothing to chance or oversight in their systematic search. Systematic, thorough, professional. They'd rehearsed this operation in similar venues until every possible contingency had been planned, analyzed, and practiced until perfection was achieved through relentless repetition and attention to detail. The kind of thorough preparation that spoke of government resources and federal backing for operations that never officially existed in any budget or congressional record. These men were ghosts, officially non-existent, but very real in their capacity for violence and elimination of problems that embarrassed powerful people in positions of authority. Their very presence here meant someone with serious political clout wanted Amanda Walsh dead and buried before she could expose more corruption and treason in government agencies that were supposed to serve the American people rather than exploit them. "On my signal, not before," Carter whispered, his lips barely moving as he spoke in tones that wouldn't carry beyond her ears or alert their hunters to their position and escape plans. Veronica nodded with jerky desperation that spoke of someone completely unused to mortal danger, despite years of corporate warfare and boardroom battles for market dominance and financial control. Terror made her compliant in ways that boardroom intimidation and business pressure had never achieved in her professional life of power and control over others. Her perfectly styled blonde hair had come loose during their frantic movement across the restaurant, framing her face in disheveled waves that suggested vulnerability beneath corporate armor. Expensive makeup smeared where tears threatened to fall like rain from storm clouds gathering overhead, with promise of worse weather and greater danger. The powerful woman who'd dismissed him as beneath her notice and social consideration now clung to his strength like a drowning person grasping driftwood in storm-tossed seas. Class distinctions and social hierarchies meant nothing when death stalked the innocent, and powerful government forces hunted civilians for political purposes that violated every principle of democratic government and constitutional protection. In moments of genuine crisis, only character mattered, and Carter's character had been forged in fires that civilian life couldn't comprehend or appreciate until survival became the only consideration that mattered. The salt shaker flew through candlelit air with perfect accuracy, learned in places where missing your target meant death for entire units of soldiers under your command and protection. It struck the light switch with ceramic precision that spoke of countless hours practicing improvised weapons techniques in classified training facilities around the world where unconventional warfare was taught to elite operators. Impact. Complete darkness swallowed the restaurant as electrical circuits died in sparking protest that illuminated chaos for brief, stroboscopic moments that revealed terrified faces and desperate movement. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red, while backup systems whined to life with mechanical screams of electronic protest against systematic failure. Carter moved before the ceramic finished shattering against the wall behind the switch, muscle memory guiding every step through darkness that would have left civilians stumbling and helpless. His arm swept Veronica from her chair with practiced efficiency, guiding her toward the kitchen while gunfire erupted behind them like deadly fireworks that painted muzzle flashes against emergency lighting. Bullets whined through air where they'd been standing moments before, professional marksmanship seeking targets that no longer existed in their previous positions. The darkness gave them precious seconds of advantage against hunters who'd expected easy prey rather than trained opposition capable of tactical thinking and strategic planning under extreme pressure. Every second counted now. Every movement could mean the difference between life and death for both of them, and the innocent people trapped in this government-sponsored nightmare. Swinging doors burst open under Carter's shoulder as they plunged into the restaurant's industrial heart, like deep-sea divers seeking underwater sanctuary from surface storms that threatened to destroy everything in their path. The kitchen stretched before them in stainless steel and rising steam, a labyrinth of prep stations and industrial equipment that could provide cover or improvised weapons for desperate defenders against overwhelming odds. Professional-grade knives scattered across cutting boards while gas burners still blazed beneath forgotten pans that would soon burn without human attention and care. The air hung thick with garlic, herbs, and mounting terror that seasoned everything with the metallic taste of fear and approaching death that fouled every breath. Carter's eyes swept the space with tactical precision that catalogued every potential weapon, exit route, and defensive position within seconds of entry, his mind automatically creating multiple battle plans for various contingencies and scenarios. Industrial kitchen equipment could be turned into weapons or fortifications with proper knowledge and desperate creativity born from military training and combat experience. Steam could provide concealment, hot oil could become liquid fire, and sharp edges could level the playing field against superior numbers and firepower through close-quarters combat that favored defenders who knew the terrain. The familiar environment of food preparation became a battlefield where survival depended on tactical thinking and adaptive strategy rather than superior equipment and numerical advantage. "Back exit's completely blocked," he announced after checking the rear door through its reinforced window that showed armed figures waiting in darkness with professional patience and tactical discipline. Two more figures in identical tactical gear waited in the alley beyond, with weapons trained on the only obvious escape route, with overlapping fields of fire that would cut down anyone attempting to flee. Professional patience and thorough preparation that spoke of extensive surveillance and planning phases conducted over weeks or possibly months of careful observation and intelligence gathering. Veronica's breathing hitched as hope withered like flowers in winter frost that killed everything green and growing with relentless cold that penetrated to the bone. "They planned this entire operation with military precision," Carter continued, his voice carrying grim admiration for their enemy's thoroughness and professional competence in matters of life and death that most civilians never encountered. "Someone provided detailed intelligence about your habits, your schedule, your security measures, and your personal weaknesses that could be exploited for tactical advantage. The level of preparation suggested government resources and federal backing for an operation that officially didn't exist but was very real in its capacity for violence and elimination of political problems. Someone with serious clout wanted Amanda Walsh dead and buried before she could expose more corruption in agencies that were supposed to protect American citizens rather than hunt them like animals for political purposes that violated constitutional principles and democratic ideals." Veronica's legs trembled as implications crashed over her like Arctic waves carrying ice from polar regions where nothing survived for extended periods without proper preparation and iron will to endure. Someone had orchestrated this entire evening with surgical precision that spoke of inside knowledge and extensive government resources that most civilians couldn't imagine or comprehend through peaceful existence. The blind date invitation that had seemed so innocent when it arrived through mutual friends she'd trusted completely for years of careful friendship and social interaction. The restaurant choice she'd dismissed as quaint, but acceptable for slumming with working-class men beneath her social station and educational background in elite institutions. The timing that put her in this specific place at this exact moment when professional killers could strike with maximum efficiency and minimal witnesses to government-sponsored assassination operations, everything choreographed to deliver her into waiting hands like a carefully wrapped present for government assassins operating under federal protection and political immunity from prosecution. "How can you possibly know that?" she gasped, studying the man who'd become completely invisible to her moments earlier during their disastrous dinner conversation. Corporate power and social status meant nothing when government forces decided to eliminate problems that threatened political careers and exposed systematic corruption in federal agencies that operated beyond congressional oversight and constitutional limitations. The careful construction of her new identity had been compromised by someone with access to classified information and government resources that should have been protecting her rather than hunting her like an animal marked for elimination. "Because that's exactly what I would do in their tactical position." The words slipped past Carter's defenses, before he could stop them from revealing too much about his background and specialized training in government operations. Veronica's eyes widened as understanding dawned like a terrible sunrise, illuminating landscapes of destruction and death that stretched beyond visible horizons of normal civilian experience. The nervous mechanic who'd stammered through dinner conversation had been performance art, worthy of professional actors trained in deep cover operations and identity construction for classified missions. The real Carter Blake carried knowledge that shouldn't exist in small-town auto shops that serviced family vehicles and farm equipment for honest people living peaceful lives. Military bearing hidden beneath civilian clothes and carefully constructed small-town simplicity that fooled casual observers and social interactions with neighbors who knew nothing of his true background. Tactical awareness disguised as working-class ordinariness and rural naivety that masked deadly capabilities learned in classified facilities, where ordinary men were transformed into government weapons. The kind of specialized skills that turned civilian mechanics into lethal operators capable of incredible violence when circumstances demanded immediate action against enemies, foreign and domestic, who threatened national security or political stability. His presence here wasn't coincidence, but part of a larger pattern she couldn't yet comprehend, but was beginning to fear with growing dread for her safety and survival. Heavy footsteps approached the kitchen doors, with measured confidence that spoke of men accustomed to successful operations and minimal resistance from civilian targets who lacked proper training in combat and survival. Steel clanged against steel as the tactical team regrouped, communication flowing through hand signals and radio whispers that coordinated movement with military efficiency learned in classified facilities where death was taught as patriotic duty. They'd lost visual contact, but gained territorial advantage in the exchange that gave them control over the battlefield and tactical initiative against desperate prey seeking escape from professional hunters. The kitchen represented a perfect trap, with severely limited options for desperate prey seeking escape from their professional hunters, with superior equipment and extensive training in urban combat scenarios. No windows large enough for human passage to the outside world, and freedom from pursuit by government forces with unlimited resources. One exit blocked by their teammates positioned in the alley, with overlapping fields of fire that would cut down anyone attempting escape. The other leading directly into coordinated crossfire and certain death for anyone foolish enough to attempt breaking through their established perimeter. Carter's jaw tightened as tactical scenarios played through his mind, like computer simulations running multiple probability calculations simultaneously to find any possible escape route. Professional military assessment told him their chances were slim against overwhelming odds and superior firepower, but desperate circumstances sometimes created opportunities that careful planning couldn't anticipate or prevent through standard tactical doctrine. "Freezer, right now," he decided, pointing toward the walk-in unit humming against the far wall like a mechanical heart, pumping refrigerated blood through industrial veins that sustained the restaurant's food preservation systems. Industrial-grade construction with thick, insulated walls that could stop small arms fire and muffle human screams from outside observers who might interfere with operations or call for help. Soundproof enough to buy precious time. That might mean the difference between life and death for both of them, in this desperate situation that offered few alternatives to certain death. Maybe enough time for local police to respond to emergency calls from terrified civilians who'd witnessed the violent assault on innocent diners enjoying peaceful evenings. Maybe enough time to devise something better than dying in a restaurant kitchen while children watched through windows with traumatized eyes that would carry these images forever. The freezer represented hope, however slim and cold that hope might prove under circumstances that clearly favored their professional hunters with superior numbers and equipment designed for killing rather than protecting innocent life. Industrial refrigeration units were built like bunkers, designed to maintain temperature regardless of external conditions, which meant they could provide temporary sanctuary from immediate threats while they planned their next move against overwhelming odds. Sometimes survival came down to buying precious seconds and minutes rather than achieving decisive victory against superior forces with unlimited resources and government backing. The freezer door sealed behind them with a pneumatic hiss that sounded like finality itself, breathing frost into their faces and exposed skin that began to numb immediately. Suddenly their world contracted to 6 feet by 8 feet of hanging meat and frozen vegetables that surrounded them like a tomb built for the living dead who had nowhere else to run. Vapor rose from their mouths in ghostly streams, while their bodies pressed together for warmth in the artificial winter of industrial refrigeration designed for food preservation rather than human survival. Veronica's designer suit provided negligible insulation against temperatures designed to preserve food rather than sustain human life and comfort during extended exposure to sub-freezing conditions. Carter shrugged out of his flannel shirt without hesitation, draping it around her shoulders despite her earlier contempt and social dismissal that had cut deeper than any physical blade could manage to wound his pride. The gesture spoke of character that transcended immediate circumstances and personal insults delivered with corporate cruelty that revealed more about her values than his worth as a human being. Survival situations stripped away social pretenses and revealed true character beneath carefully constructed facades that fooled casual observers, but couldn't withstand genuine crisis and mortal danger. Class distinctions meant nothing when death stalked the innocent and government forces hunted civilians for political purposes that violated constitutional principles and democratic ideals that formed the foundation of American society. Who exactly is Amanda Walsh? His question cut through chattering teeth and grinding machinery like a razor-sharp blade through silk fabric that had been stretched too thin by years of deception and careful identity construction. Veronica's face crumpled as 14 years of carefully maintained lies and constructed identity collapsed in freezing air that turned every breath into visible ghosts of vapor that revealed their location. The name she'd buried beneath corporate success and geographic distance that had never been far enough from pursuing enemies with unlimited government backing. The identity that followed her across state lines and international borders like a persistent ghost, seeking vengeance for the living and breathing witnesses to government corruption and political treason. Her throat closed around words she hadn't spoken aloud in over a decade of careful silence and deliberate forgetting, designed to protect her sanity and survival instincts from overwhelming trauma. The truth hurt more than any physical pain she'd ever experienced in her privileged life of corporate power and financial security that meant nothing against government assassination squads. Speaking the name aloud would make it real again, would bring back memories she'd spent years trying to bury beneath layers of professional success and geographical distance from the site of her parents' murder by government agents who'd sworn to protect American citizens rather than eliminate them for political purposes. My real name from before everything changed forever, she whispered, voice breaking on syllables that tasted like copper pennies and fermented regret that had poisoned her dreams for years of restless sleep. My parents were David and Susan Walsh, aerospace engineers working on classified defense contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars to national security and military superiority. They discovered their company was selling quantum encryption technology to foreign buyers who wanted American military secrets for hostile purposes against democratic nations and allied governments. When they tried to expose the conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government agencies supposedly responsible for protecting national security. Her voice died as memories overwhelmed present danger with images that never faded, regardless of time or distance, traveled in futile attempts at escape from pursuing government forces. The blood pooled on sterile laboratory floors where her parents had worked to protect American interests rather than exploit them for personal gain. The deafening silence that followed coordinated gunshots fired by government agents who'd eliminated problems rather than solved them through legal channels. The terrible knowledge that she was next on the elimination list maintained by government assassins who operated beyond congressional oversight and constitutional limitations designed to protect innocent citizens from tyrannical government power. Carter's expression softened despite their desperate circumstances as pieces of a larger puzzle clicked together with horrible clarity that painted disturbing pictures of government corruption and corporate treason at the highest levels of political power. Corporate espionage wrapped in patriotic rhetoric that disguised pure greed as national security imperatives and personal profit as patriotic duty to country and constitution that had been systematically violated. Murdered whistleblowers systematically labeled as traitors by the same federal agencies they'd tried to serve with honor and personal integrity, despite enormous personal risk to themselves and their families. A 21-year-old witness who'd spent 14 precious years of her life running from the consequences of her parents' moral conscience and unwavering courage in facing impossible odds against overwhelming government power and political corruption. You testified against them in federal court, he stated rather than asked, reading the timeline of tragedy written across her haunted features like scars from old battles that never fully healed despite time and distance. The courage that must have required impressed him despite everything they'd survived together during this nightmarish evening that had transformed from social awkwardness into life-or-death combat against government forces. Standing up to government corruption required a special kind of bravery that most people never possessed or developed through comfortable lives protected by others' sacrifice and vigilance against threats, foreign and domestic. Federal courthouse in Seattle during the sweltering summer of 2011, Veronica confirmed with bitter laughter that carried absolutely no humor, just acidic memories that had burned permanent holes in her soul over the years of running and hiding. I put 12 men in federal prison for treason and premeditated murder of American citizens who'd tried to protect their country from foreign exploitation and domestic corruption that reached the highest levels of government. Some of them earned early release just last month through good behavior credits and political connections that money could purchase from corrupt officials who valued profit over justice. The irony tasted like concentrated poison on her frozen tongue that could barely form coherent words through chattering teeth and emotional trauma that threatened to overwhelm her fragile control. Good behavior evaluations from convicted men who'd cold-bloodedly executed her parents for choosing country over profit margins and stock options that mattered more than human lives or constitutional principles. The justice system had failed her family completely and utterly in every possible way, proving that government corruption extended far beyond individual agencies into the very foundations of American legal institutions that were supposed to protect innocent citizens rather than enable their persecution and elimination. "Absolutely perfect," Carter said, though his voice carried emotional weight that transcended childhood artwork and colored paper assignments from elementary school teachers who couldn't imagine the violence they'd survived together through government persecution and assassination attempts. Veronica added finishing touches with careful precision that spoke of someone who'd learned to value small gestures and everyday miracles of peaceful existence after years of running and hiding from government forces. Her steady hand belied everything they'd survived together during 3 months of federal investigation and media attention that had finally revealed the truth about systematic government corruption and political treason. Outside, November wind moved through bare branches, while inside, 3 people who'd found each other accidentally through violence and government corruption discovered they'd chosen each other with complete intentionality and permanent commitment that transcended the circumstances of their initial meeting in that restaurant, where everything had changed forever for all of them.